rock fans and bands need to decide what they want. Like, do you want to be mainstream or not? What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today I wanted to talk about kind of the elephant in the room that nobody really wants to admit, but is kind of obvious to everybody who's paying attention, which is that rock is dying. And I've talked about this before in some of my other videos, but I got a DM that really made me think about it and kind of dig deeper than I have before. So, do you think that metal and hardcore will be less relevant in the 2020s? Is it the band's fault, the fans? And do you think it's actually dying, as in less people, less volume of people listen and consume metal and hardcore? What can we do to bring it back, if that's even possible? Well, to answer the question, yes, of course it's dying. Like, obviously rock is dying. If you can't see that, then you are not looking. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly why. I've broken it down to 3 reasons why rock is dying. But before I get into those 3 reasons, I want to thank Storyblocks Audio for sponsoring this video. Storyblocks Audio is a great service for when you're in need of a quick soundbite for any project. You get unlimited downloads from studio quality audio clips, loops, music tracks, and sound effects with a membership to Storyblocks Audio. All content is royalty free, so you can use it for commercial and personal projects such as YouTube videos. New clips are added regularly, so there's always something fresh to download. I would very highly recommend checking this out if you do like videos, a podcast, games, like anything where sound and music is involved, because good music, sound design, sound effects make a huge difference. I would actually say that audio quality is more important than video quality in a lot of cases. And finding high quality audio that doesn't cost an arm and a leg is by far the biggest pain in the butt for me, and I think a lot of other creators, and Storyblocks Audio instantly solves that problem. There's over 42,000 sound effects, so now when I want something, I'm not gonna have to Google and go through all these like sketchy, crappy, free wave sound effects kind of sites. It's all right there for me on Storyblocks Audio. If you want to learn more about Storyblocks Audio, just hit that link in the description, and with that out of the way, let's get into it.
The record industry is dead because of the fans. They killed it.
Well, first of all, is rock actually dead or dying? To me, the answer is glaringly obvious. Like, yes, in terms of mainstream popularity, rock is definitely dying, if not completely dead. But I know a lot of you guys aren't going to want to hear it, so let's look at the data and see what it says. As one data point, if you look at the Spotify top 50 songs for like the US and global top 50, there is one rock band between those 2 charts, and that band is 5 Seconds of Summer. So kind of debatably even a rock band at all. So it's pretty much absent there. But a lot of you guys are going to bring up the fact that Slipknot just had a #1 album, that there's all these European festivals that sell a ton of tickets, the fact that Tool's new album, which came out this week, is probably going to go to #1 or at least close to it. So big picture, if we like zoom out, one single rock band in Spotify top 50, to me that says a lot. And as far as Slipknot and Tool and those other bands, well, if the most successful examples of rock bands in 2019 are like 25-year-old bands, well, I don't know. That to me doesn't say that the genre is in great shape.
Congratulations for 20 years of very hard-earned and worthy success.
Which actually brings me to my next point. The DM asked whether the fans or the bands are to blame, and the answer is yes, both of them are. But let me start with the fans. Problem number 1 with the fans is that, honestly, they're just completely stuck in the past. And what do I mean by that? Well, as a couple data points, let's look at the lineups for some of the big festivals both here in the US and abroad. For example, Riot Fest. Of all the artists like in the top 2 lines, only 2 of them were formed after the 90s. So like the youngest bands in that group are 20 years old. Quite a few of them are 80s bands, and in the case of the Descendants, they're a 70s band. And to be clear, I love the Descendants. I'm just pointing out what it is, that this is a bunch of guys in their 50s. That's who's headlining a big rock festival like this. Or let's look at Download, one of the biggest festivals over in the UK. Again, it's mostly 80s and 90s bands. There's a couple younger bands like Hailstorm and Enter Shikari, but even those bands are well over 10 years old. And that's 2 bands out of like, what, 25 or so like big names on the flyer? There are 0 headlining bands that came out this decade. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the bands, I'm just saying that these festivals are dominated by older bands. And I could keep going with more examples, but you get the idea. Pretty much the same for every rock festival out there. The one exception I would say is a day to remember Self-Help Festival, which has like I Prevail and Beartooth and some other bands that are from this decade. Very refreshing to see that, but you know, that's just one festival out of the, what, dozens that happen every year.
Zombie circle pit, show me.
And then you contrast that with a hip hop festival like, say, Rolling Loud. Just could not be more different. It's the exact polar opposite of what you see at a rock festival. Yes, there's a handful of older artists like Lil Wayne and DMX, and I guess you would say Gucci Mane is older by rap standards. But most of the top names on that flyer are people like Juice WRLD, Sheck West, Gunna, 21 Savage that have been putting out music for like 3 to 5 years. The headliners are all fresh blood. So you can see the contrast between like the rock and hip hop festivals. Well, who cares? Why is this important? Let me unpack it. So the first question to ask ourselves is, why are promoters filling the festivals with all these legacy bands? Because that's what sells tickets. It's very simple. The promoters are in the business of giving the people what they want, and the people have told us that they want these old legacy 80s and 90s bands. And why is this a problem? Well, it should be pretty obvious. If the top slots in these festivals are all dominated by the same older bands, it means that we are not developing new stars to take their place when those bands retire. And remember, these guys are in their 40s, 50s, sometimes even their 60s, so they're not going to be here forever.
I'm getting too old for this sort of thing.
So you can tell me all day long that rock is doing great because this festival or that festival sells 1 billion tickets and Iron Maiden is selling out stadiums all over the world, and hey, that's great. I'm sure the promoter is happy about that. But what about 5 years from now? Who's going to be selling out arenas then? And what does it say that Whitesnake, of all bands, is headlining a rock festival in 2019?
Like a drifter, I was born to walk along.
And besides that, it's not just the festivals. That's only one example of what I'm talking about as far as rock fans being stuck in the past. If you look at the rock press, the headlines are dominated by those same like old legacy bands. If you're an up-and-coming young band trying to get press coverage, good luck with that. They're probably not going to write about your band because they're busy writing an article about Corey Taylor's latest tweet. And why is that? Again, it's because these websites and magazines are just in the business of giving the people what they want. And what the readers have demonstrated with their clicks and their attention is that what they care about is these dusty old bands from the 80s and 90s.
Thing is, when you stay stuck in the past and hung up on something that no longer is, you don't create any kind of space for anybody new to come into your life.
And it's not just the festivals, it's not just the press, like literally everything about rock culture is decades behind basically the rest of the world. Rock fans still listen to the radio, they're still obsessed with physical media like CDs and vinyl that other people stopped using 10 or 20 years ago. So basically, the bottom line is this: the fans are the ones in control, and what they have decided is that they don't particularly care about anything that happened after 2005 or so. So as you can tell, I'm obviously frustrated with rock fans, but the fans are only one part of the equation. The bands deserve their fair share of the blame too.
The biggest music on earth is rap music because rockers stopped acting like rock stars.
Problem number one is that bands don't want to be rock stars anymore. Look at the biggest rock bands of the 80s and 90s. Blink-182, No Doubt, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Pantera, Nirvana. You can go down the list as long as you want. All of them made great music, yes, but the reason that they became just these absolutely massive global juggernauts is because they had star power. Axl, Slash, Gwen Stefani, Tommy Lee, Phil Anselmo, everybody in Blink. These are all like larger than life, huge personalities with just undeniable star power. And that was true not just at the mainstream level, but also at the alternative, like not quite mainstream kind of level. Danzig, Henry Rollins, Rob Zombie. Those people would never call themselves rock stars. Well, I don't know, Danzig might. But regardless of whether they would identify as rock stars or not, that's what they were.
It's really evil. Heavy.
And where are the rock stars now? Not in rock, that's for sure. These days, rappers and DJs are bigger rock stars than rock bands are. Drake, Lil Pump, Cardi B, like that's the new Axl Rose, Tommy Lee, and Gwen Stefani. And I've been kind of marinating on this idea for a while, but it really hit home to me when I was watching the Travis Scott documentary on Netflix the other day. And for any rock fans out there who may not know who Travis Scott is, well, he's pretty much one of the biggest rappers on the planet. Huge, gigantic, massive star. And he hasn't even been around for that long. Like his first real mixtape came out, I think, like 5 or 6 years ago. And since then, he's had 2 #1 albums back to back. He's got about 20 million followers on Instagram, and as of now, 32 million Spotify listeners. And just to kind of contextualize that number for you, that's 3 times as many listeners as Metallica. What really kind of struck me about that documentary is watching how he just fucking completely controlled the crowds. These are arenas of like 10,000 people just all going off like it's a Knocked Loose show or something. So it kind of made me think, what new rock band could like dominate an arena of 10,000 people like that? And again, don't tell me about Slipknot and Tool and Metallica. I'm talking about new bands, not bands that are like 25, 30, 40 years old. Like, I don't even think that's what bands aspire to anymore. Like, it's not cool to say that you want to play arena shows like that.
I'm taking our music to the next level. Guitar rock utilizing nihilist grunge energies.
Now, to be fair, I think there are some new bands who do get it and do feel larger than life. For example, Ghost, who I personally think are boring as shit, but obviously they're doing something right because their last 2 albums were both in the Billboard Top 10, which is pretty crazy for a band that looks and sounds like they do. Or as another example, Five Finger Death Punch. You know, say what you want about them and their music. It's not necessarily my favorite band in the world, but I think they're a great example of a band that really does feel larger than life. They really do feel like stars, and for as much hate as they get, they're obviously doing something right because they play to like packed arenas and they have 6 albums in the Billboard Top 10. And what's ironic is that as successful as those bands are, they're 2 of the most hated bands in rock. It just kind of shows that it's no longer cool to be a rock star in rock.
Pain is brown.
Problem number 2 is that rock bands don't want to be part of like mainstream pop culture anymore. So what I mean by that is like there's this weird dynamic where rock bands and fans simultaneously like hate on and reject mainstream pop culture, yet are also super mad and butthurt that they're not part of the conversation in mainstream pop culture anymore. Like on the one hand, they're like,
fuck you guys, we don't want to sit at your fucking table. We got our own table.
And then 2 seconds later,
hey, what the fuck? How come you didn't ask us to sit at your table?
like, what? What do you want? And so you might be saying, who cares? Fuck mainstream pop culture. I hate all that shit anyway. Well, the reason why that matters is very simple. If rock is not part of mainstream pop culture, then it becomes irrelevant and unknown to everybody other than the like dedicated few who are willing to like really seek it out. Let me just give you a few examples to like really spell out what I'm talking about here. So like speaking of Travis Scott, I think it's pretty safe to say that his career got just like a massive boost from having a kid with Kylie Jenner, right? And again, for any rock fans out there who may not be familiar with Kylie Jenner, she's really fucking famous. And she started dating Travis Scott a couple years ago. Travis was already famous on his own, obviously, or he wouldn't be dating Kylie in the first place. But being her baby daddy was just like a shot of steroids for his career. Just took him to like a whole other level compared to where he was before. Because now, instead of just being in headlines on Complex or whatever, like these publications that only core hip-hop fans pay attention to, but now he's exposed to a much bigger audience because he's in the headline of every like celebrity gossip magazine or website or Instagram account because he's with Kylie Jenner, and Kylie Jenner is really fucking famous. For better or for worse, that's just kind of how it works. It's all about being in the public eye, building an audience, building a personal brand, and then that just amplifies everything you do as a musician. And rock is just basically not a part of that whole ecosystem at all. And although it's easy to forget or maybe pretend like it didn't happen, it was not always like this. In fact, rock actually used that whole like pop culture platform thing to build some of the biggest stars of the last generation, probably some of your favorite bands. The most obvious example, I think, is probably Fred Durst, and whether you like him or not, Limp Bizkit was a fucking huge band. And how did that happen? I think a big part of it was that Fred Durst was part of that whole like mainstream pop culture machine back in the early 2000s. He was rumored to be dating Britney Spears, he did that VMAs thing with Christina Aguilera, he was on MTV all the time, like basically he would just take any opportunity he could to be in the eye of like mainstream pop culture. And is it a coincidence that he was by far the biggest star of the nu metal era and that Limp Bizkit was by far the biggest band? I don't think so. Or as another example, Blink-182. MTV was the platform that built that band, no question about it. They were on TRL all the time, they did every awards show, like they played the MTV Spring Break specials, they were on Made, Travis even had his own reality show for a couple seasons, I think people forget that. Basically, if there was a chance for them to be on TV, they took it. Or like I've talked about before, Bert from The Used being on the Osbournes, like that was just totally a shot in the arm for their career. And was it kind of lame that he was on the Osbournes and that Travis had a reality show? Yeah, maybe, but that's how the game works. Like, if you want to get that mainstream attention, sometimes you're gonna do some kind of corny shit.
All in the game, yo. All in the game.
Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys are saying,
fuck that shit, fuck the Kardashians, fuck MTV, we don't want to be part of that bullshit.
But I think what it comes down to is this. Rock fans and bands need to decide what they want. Like, do you want to be mainstream or not? You need to pick one and then make sure that your actions align with the things that you say you want. If you're cool with rock continuing down the path that it's on, then great. Just don't be surprised in like 7 to 10 years from now when the average age of a rock fan is 38, teenagers barely know what a guitar is, and a rock band is lucky to draw enough people to fill a bar.
The place is jam-packed.
And if you do want rock to be mainstream again, well, then you have to understand that this is the entertainment business and you need to treat it like a business. You've got to stop that weird schizophrenic thinking where you like simultaneously hate and reject mainstream pop culture, yet also expect them to embrace rock. And you've also got to start building new stars, fresh blood, before the current ones die of old age. Because at the end of the day, rock fans and bands, the fate of the genre is in your hands. You decide what is popular, you decide what's successful, you choose what happens to the genre, and you choose that with your actions by where you spend your money and where you spend your attention. So I'll end this just by asking a simple question. What do you want?
What do you want? What do you want?
So there you go. To whoever DM'd me, because I forgot to save your name, I apologize for that. I hope I answered your question, and I hope you weren't distracted by this weird thing on my face here where I got headbutted. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you agree that rock is dying or doomed? If not, I'd love to know why you think I'm wrong. And if you do agree, tell me how you feel about that. Like, is it okay? Or do you want rock to become mainstream again? And if so, what are you gonna do about it? I also want to thank everybody who supports me on Patreon at the true cult level or above. And those people are Andy B, Anthony C, Amber G, B Sacrilegious, End of May, Jeff W, Jordan H, Jonas E, Justin H, Luke S, Michael B, Militant Me, Nick G, Ridley H, Ryan W, The Quiet Canvas, John R, and Wally P. You guys are true cult fans. I appreciate your support very, very much. You have my eternal gratitude. If you are interested in sponsoring me on Patreon, there's a link to that in the description. There's like a Patreon-only audio podcast feed of all the videos, monthly Q&As, private Discord server, some other stuff. If you're interested in that, just hit that link below. And I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.